Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for coming. We are going to be discussing today on an introduction to data-centric digital rights. So my name is Jean-François. You can call me John. I'm the founder and CEO of feedback. I'm the founder and CEO of an organization called the IO Foundation. We are tech NGO advocating for data-centric digital rights. So we're going to be looking into what are DCDR and why you as a programmer, most of you programmers, it should matter to you. So the first thing I would like to have a show of hands. How many of you are developers? Front-end, back-end, full stack. Cybersecurity? Okay, one up there. No one over there? No? Cafe? No? All right. So that gives you a pretty much of an impression of the kind of topic I'm going to be discussing and how can I customize it a little bit more for you guys. We're going to be looking today into first setting the stage about the conversation, then having a bit of a look about what are rights and what's the history behind rights, and what is data-centric digital rights and the framework that we are developing in the IO Foundation. I've been told several times, and I've been repeated again now, that I tend to speak very fast. So if I do so, just ask me to slow down, okay? I'll try to keep it in mind. All right, so setting the stage. The two elephants in the room. There's not only one in this case, there's two elephants in the room. And the first one is that all of you are both things at the same time. You are builders of technology, you are also users of technology. So all the predicaments that are affecting each of one of these groups are affecting to you at the same time. What kind of predicaments? Well, you have to confront a number of fallacies in a number of situations. The typical user doesn't care much about privacy. Edward Snowden put it very, very nicely. Not caring about privacy because you have nothing to hide is akin of saying that you don't care about freedom of expression because you have nothing to say. All right? Privacy matters. Your privacy matters. And if you guys think that you have absolutely nothing to hide, I invite you to give me your PIN number of your credit card and tell me the last time you had a date and had sex. Okay? I'm pretty sure you're not going to want to share those things. Therefore, privacy does matter to you, and it matters to everybody. And most importantly, it's not always about your own privacy, but also preserving the privacy of others. Because one day you will need them to protect yours. The second thing to consider is this stupid thing that we are having, which is everyone has to be a hacker nowadays. You buy a device, you're a regular user, you need to know how to configure it, how to protect it, which applications are extracting data from you, which ones are asking some specific permissions, why is this flashlight application asking me for GPS position type of thing. Okay, that's way too much. We are asking way too much technical knowledge from regular users. I don't know how a car is built. None of my business. I only have to drive it. The second one is we have this big problem with all of your data is being extracted on a daily basis. Many ways this is happening, and possibly some of the applications that you may even be designing is also falling into this problem where you are extracting data from users. Sometimes you don't even realize that it's happening. Then you have this other big thing that applies to you, that you have to be compliant with the law. You are, in this case, living in Malaysia. Malaysia has a number of regulations that have to do with technology, data protection law, etc., Data Protection Act, sorry. And any single product that you release in Malaysia has to be compliant. And if not, you actually can be legally liable for it. In the case of PDPA, the act that was issued in 2010, if memory serves me, the biggest fine that can go to you is $500,000 ringgit and up to 3 years of jail. It's not a joke. Okay? So you need to be able to juggle with all of those things when you are designing your software. And the important part is that there isn't any way for you to verify that you are compliant with those regulations. That's really the problem. So PDPA is issued, and they tell you a piece of paper with pretty words telling you what's supposed to be happening, but they're not telling you how to verify that you are complying with that particular policy. And that happens all over the world. It's not only Malaysia. So the big challenge that you guys have is that in every single properly regulated market, all competitors are competing only at value proposition level. They don't compete at compliance level. Because in order to be in the market, you already have to be compliant. Otherwise, you can't get in. There's not a single car in the market that is not compliant with Malaysian regulations. There's not a single cell phone that is not in Malaysia being sold legally that is not compliant with Malaysian regulations. But software, different story. You can release software, be or be not compliant, nobody cares. I release it, good luck trying to find me if anything goes wrong. So the problem is from a competitive perspective, companies are competing at level and investing in money that they shouldn't. Startups have a very different standing than big tech, for instance, who can themselves budget for compliance and budget for the fines they may get if they're not compliant. Because most startups actually have to spend a lot of resources to fight in a battle they shouldn't be concerned themselves with. So the summary of the situation is that, one, governments are losing a lot of agency over their own citizens because of the extraction of data. The second is that citizens are way too expected to be experts on the technology they use. And the experts, we should be the ones who should be helping all of this to not happen. They don't have the tools to prevent it. Now the question is, in what kind of digital world do you guys want to exist? Because your data is existing already there. So how do you want that data to be treated? And how do you want programmers to treat your data? So let's play a little game. Who knows what's a right? Who dares to give me a definition of a right? It's okay to be wrong. Nobody? Okay, the definition that you find in the Wikipedia is that the right is a legal, social, or ethical principle of freedom or entitlement. All of that gibbity of words basically means that you have a number of things that are provided to you that you have the right to, okay? And that the government has to make sure that they happen. And yeah, you guys have rights. Did you know that? Okay? Under the Malaysian Constitution, those are 3 examples of rights that you have. There's many others, but those are just 3 examples that I picked up randomly. So you have the right to life and liberty, rights in respect to education, and rights to property. And those apply to you as a person, as a human being walking, being a citizen of Malaysia. Okay? Now, how did that came to be? Why did we end up having rights? It just didn't happen overnight. Okay? Turns out that there was this piece of ball in the middle of the universe called planet Earth, and we started populating it. We started having bigger and bigger societies and more complex societies. And we decided, oh, it would be actually nice to treat each other nicely. And we realized that in order for societies to prosper, certain assumptions in terms of what the rights would be, freedom of expression, freedom of movement, freedom of religion, etc., would be conducive and would be a good thing for people to thrive and to be happier and to have better lives and to respect each other. Okay? Those are foundational things in societies. And rights are basically based for humans. So hence the label, of human rights. We looked upon what were the protections we wanted to provide to humans in order to make their lives better and how to have thriving societies. What happened was, across centuries of years where this has been a movement going on, really I'm not going to go into the whole history, but after World War II, because we had a Holocaust and because we had this brilliant idea of bombing 2 Japanese cities, everyone got very, very scared and very, very sensitive about human life, and we decided to pass what's called the Universal Declaration of Human Rights by the United Nations. Okay? So now what we have is a general understanding about what rights should be across the world, aside from whatever is applied locally on each one of the constitutions, for instance, in Malaysia. Okay? Now, who are the builders of human rights? This is very simplified, but it's a good way to look at it. Policymakers, lawyers, and human rights defenders. And guess what a law is? So rights are applied through law. They are established in the Constitution or any of the documents. They are made law. Guess what laws are? They're an algorithm. They're an algorithm that manages what? Societies. It manages humans. Okay? So, what we have is these little entities that move together, societies, people, and we decide that we're going to be managing the algorithm that handles them in a way that protects them, because we recognize that protecting them is a good thing. This is possible the most nerdy joke I've ever heard, and I bloody love it. You want to go and change the world, but no one gives me the source code. That's true for our physical world. I cannot shout to the universe, make everybody free, and the universe says, yeah, sure, let's go for it. That's not happening. But what's the trick here? We control the source code with our applications. We control the source code of our applications. We get to decide how our applications operate, what they do and what they cannot do. So maybe we do have a say on how we're going to be treating people's data. So let's move into digital spaces, infrastructure, cloud services, yada, 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 routers, networks, whatever, okay? We have a very, very similar situation as what I was mentioning before with planet Earth. We have these little things, entities called data. I'm not talking here about data points specifically, I'm talking about structured data. Data that you would have based on a schema that represents a person, that represents a puff, that represents a table, that represents whatever object, okay? And, well, if we want to protect them, the same way that we have human rights, maybe we start thinking about data rights. In this case, data-centric digital rights that are based on the data that generates those entities. And what are those entities? But we'll look about that later. The objective that you would like to have that is to have another universal point of reference, the same way that you have the UDHR for human rights, but for technology. Why would you want to have that? Think about it. You have PDPA in Malaysia, which is a disaster, as any other data protection law in the world. Malaysia is not worse than any other places. All data protection laws in the world are a disaster because it's just a piece of paper with no compliance verification system. Even GDPR, for as much as golden standard it is accepted to be, has exactly the same problem. No company can prove to me or to you that they are GDPR compliant. Prove it. They can claim it, and they can try their best, but they cannot prove it technically. Okay? You can't run a test unit through the software and have a result that says, yes, they are compliant. So what happens when data leaves Malaysia? It goes either to a jurisdiction with a different data protection law, good luck to see that it's comparable, or to another jurisdiction where there's no data protection law whatsoever. That sort of causes a problem. So the idea that you would like as a technologist is that as data moves from one platform to another, from one jurisdiction to another, it should be granted at least a bare minimum of protection, no matter what. And here comes your international understanding on how that should be. So, who are the builders of potential data-centric digital rights? Policymakers, lawyers, and technologists. Wait, what? Yeah, you guys. You guys are the ones who are building and architecting all the stuff that people are so much concerned about. And the big problem is that no one has been telling you this before, and no one has been telling you what you can do about it. I'm fairly certain that if I ask for another show of hands, and I ask who wants to be the bad devil who steals all the data and damages people, I'm sure no one is going to be raising their hands. All of you want to make money and at the same time do some good. At least minimize the harm that you do. The problem is if I'm asking you, what can you do to minimize that harm? The likely response is going to be, don't know. Because you don't know. It's natural response. So, the reason why we insist so much into this is because in our organization, we regard you guys as the next generation of rights defenders. And I'll be articulating this a little bit more, okay? But in the same fashion that human rights defenders across time have been making sure that human rights were properly implemented and observed in governments, you are going to be the ones making sure that technology is architected, implemented, and monitored in a way that it doesn't harm people. You should be given that option and those tools. Okay, the question is, how? Yeah, obviously, right? Okay, so we've been thinking about this for the longest time. And we tried to figure out a way, so okay, we need to be able to get a policy that is written by lawyers, that nobody understands except themselves. And we have to find a way to translate it in a way that is algorithmic for the technologies. There has to be a way for you to be able to understand at a theoretical level and a universal level how to protect data no matter the technology. I don't care if it's AI, I don't care if it's going to be CI, I don't care whatever it is. The outcome is the same. I get a hammer or I get a knife, I can still kill someone. Two different methods. I can crush them with a car, still different method. The method doesn't matter. What you want is not to kill the person. So I don't care what kind of technology I'm applying, what I want is not to harm the data of that person. And so what you want to look at it is from the data perspective, regardless of what's going to be applying to it. So we looked at it from a different definition of what is a right. We define it as the proactive attempt of avoiding to inflict a harm. And what would be a harm? Okay. So we started looking at the comparison between, again, humans and data. Humans have a very simple life cycle. You are born in point A, you are dead in point B. And everything that you're trying to do for the rest of your life is keeping B as far as possible from A. You don't want to die immediately, okay? So you're just trying to just survive, 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 survive. We consider that anything that brings B closer to A is a harm. Anything that harms you shortens your life cycle, your lifespan, okay? Now, the cool way of looking at this is that now that I have those potential harms, now I have a taxonomy. Now I can define what is it that I'm looking into as potential harms for a person. And now that I have that taxonomy, I can define what are going to be the rights to avoid those harms. Hence, human rights. If you take any single universal human right, specifically from the UDHR, and you remove it from someone and play an imaginary scenario all the way down the last consequence, that person dies. Okay? So, you will have your physical harms. Now, the reason why we looked into data here was because there is this interesting fallacy where data is this magical dust that is floating around, and that some magicians can take it, put it into a cauldron, apply some software, and here comes a magical result. That's actually nonsense. Okay? The only reason why a data set is interesting for me from him is because I know it's about him. If a given data set is not sufficiently contextualized, there's no value for me and nobody else. So the moment that it is connected to you, it is you. End of the story. And whatever you do to that digital twin may affect you physically. All right? So, first problem worldwide, there's 11 definitions about what data is around the world. If we cannot agree on what data is, it's going to be very difficult to pass any regulation internationally for as data moves from one point to another. Okay? So that's already one problem. Now, what does that data do? There's this concept called digital twins, which is basically the model that is generated out of you or any other thing around you in the physical space into data. And that's what I was mentioning before, that you look at it from a structural perspective. Because I don't care about the rights about your strain of DNA or your protein folded in your body. I care about you whole as a whole person. So I don't care about a data point. I care about a whole structure of data points that provides me a model that represents you. All right? So digital twins are going to go through a life cycle. At some point, you have a genesis. You generate a model. And that goes through a number of phases. We still don't have an answer as how that looks like. This is part of the research that we're doing. But you basically have a life cycle that is also going to be affected by potential harms, digital harms. Now the cool thing is that now you have a taxonomy. So you will know what you have to look into in how your data is modified to know what you want to avoid. Because until now I was trying to tell you things such as, oh, build me a platform with social media that is respectful with, I don't know, freedom of speech. Okay, cool, that sounds good. What's the algorithm for that? Don't know. But now you can start thinking about what will be the transformation that you may apply to data that may turn it into getting close to a specific harm. The reason why two doctors can talk to each other for a diagnosis is because they have the whole gamut, they have all the vocabulary, all the taxonomies they need in order to be able to have the conversation even without the patient on the room. They know how to categorize the cancer that the patient has. They know how to look for the chemicals they're going to need for that. They are going to be able to define the side effects of those chemicals. What are the drugs to counter the side effects? What are going to be the delivery mechanisms? What are going to be the people delivering that? What's going to be the timeline? And the reason why I can do all of these conversations is because they have one specific outcome. I want to save lives. And the reason why they can say that is because they know how to define what is a life and what are the harms that can be applied to avoid a life from being saved. The idea is that they have taxonomies and you don't have them. You need to have the technical definitions that you're going to be able to use as tools to be able to figure out what's going on around you and how you're going to be treating data so that it doesn't fall into those potential harms. So we've been looking into how to structure data-centric digital rights into a framework that could be useful, repetitive, and that can be applied in as many cases as possible. And so for us, it started with a set of premises, 3 principles, some taxonomies, structural layers, 1 oath, that's something that technologies are missing, a set of stakeholders, some policy guidelines, some pedagogical material because you want this to enter into the educational pipeline eventually. 1 timeline on how this is going to be implemented. The final outcome that you would like is an SDK, because you yourself, you shouldn't be bothered as how this is going to be implemented. It should be provided to you. So the lawyers receive a piece of paper that tells them how things have to be. Cool, that's my tool. Now I can go to the judge, say this person, you know, they had some harm, they stole some money from him, here says the law, that's my tool. That's my SDK. But as a technologist, this is just nonsense. So I need something that applies to what I build. The best thing that you can have, the next best thing, is to have a set of libraries that implement that regulation for you transparently so you don't have to worry on how to do it. It shouldn't be your problem, it shouldn't be your concern. Then of course we have to look into a financial model, as we have some good ideas about it, and then a messaging strategy, because depending on the stakeholder you have to present it differently. So the core premises that we thought were quite simple. 1, I am my data. 2nd, the core objective of any single piece of data is to extend the life cycle as much as possible, whatever that means. I still don't have a full definition how that looks like. 3rd, harms, digital harms shorten that life cycle. And 4th, rights are the proactive attempt of avoiding those harms. That's it, very simple premises. Now, we started trying to express all of this in the easiest ways as possible. And we thought about 3 principles that are easy to remember and easy to apply. That you don't even need an SDK to actually apply them. You just have to keep them in your mind when you are in front of your computer and designing what's going to be the algorithm to solve a specific problem. The first one, I am my data. And my data is me. And a very simple way to remember it is treat other people's data the same way you would like to be treated. It's just that easy. The second one is end remedy. What does remedy mean? So in law, remedy basically means that if a certain bad thing happens to me, the law may have provisions to compensate me because of that problem, to give me a remedy for it. Okay? So you have an accident on the motorbike that happens because, I don't know, something was bad in a road. You end up in the hospital and the government can be liable because of it, and so they have to pay you for your hospitalization and some compensation. That's the remedy. Now, In the physical world, all laws are remedial. All laws are reactive. Only when someone has had the harm, then the law activates. Okay? In computing, we can actually avoid most of them. So your mentality should be, why do I want to have a way to solve a problem if I can avoid the problem to begin with? And remedy. Don't think about ending up in that point. Make it so remedy is not necessary. In other words, data protection laws tell you if a user requests for data to be deleted, it should be deleted. Okay. And the law says, if the user realizes that the data was not deleted, they can go and sue the company. Well, why do I want to sue the company if it's done? I don't want to be chasing and figuring out if under my last click of a specific wizard deleted my data, it was or not done, and therefore I have to go and sue them. I want it done. I don't want to hope that my seatbelt in my car saves my life. I want it to be properly done. That's it. That's the expectation that you have for every single properly regulated product. And the third one is rights by design. Essentially, if there is a regulation that applies to your jurisdiction, do not leave it uncoded. So that the user knows that if something protects them, it's embedded into the technology. It's not up to their business to know why or how. It's not my business to know how a car is built. It's not my business to know why this building is not collapsing on my head. It's too complex for me. The only thing that I'm supposed to be doing is getting here and not set it on fire. That's my responsibility as a responsible user of the building. What you have right now in technology is every single user needs to get a master's degree on architecture every time they enter into a new building. That's ridiculous. It's an expectation that is too high for the average user. So, we also have, working on this Sagan Oath, tribute to Carl Sagan, and a big tech declaration because they are pretty much part of the problem. Now I want to, time check please. I want to make sure that I'm not extending. 56. Oh, okay, I'm good. So, I want to talk a little bit about how do we categorize, because there's been a lot of confusion, historically speaking, about human rights, digital rights, etc., even in the NGO scene, okay? And so starting from the premise that we have a physical space and a digital space, you will have an entity A and their corresponding digital twin, and then an entity B and the corresponding digital twin. Say, for instance, this is Microsoft. I hope there's nobody from Microsoft here. Okay? And all the services that they provide online. And this is any user, even myself, and the data that represents me on the digital space. Okay? Like I said, we will try to figure out a way to prototype interactions so that we can have it repeatedly. So it could be used for any single system, that we can get a regulation and they say what are the outcomes the regulation is requesting, that we can translate that into algorithms. So, we looked at it from a new way. So we don't know that anyone has been looking at it from this particular way. This was part of our research. We figured it out that there was an importance between where the harm is sourced and where it is received. And that was just give you a very simple combinatory table, whether it is sourced from a physical space or from the digital one, and whether it is received physically or digitally. And what this translates into is that in human rights, the receiver is whatever is in the physical space. So either it is initiated at a physical perspective, so I punch him on the face, initially physically, received physically. Okay? Or initiated digitally, and through my digital twin, it generates a bad outcome to me. For instance, someone goes to immigration and cancels my visa. That's going to be done by their software, and it's going to be generating some changes in my definition as a digital twin. When I go to the border, someone tags me as a lawyer, or as a thief or whatever it is, I end up in jail. It affects me physically. Okay? So we decided, or we have been classifying human rights as the receiver is on the physical world. Now, looking at digital, it is whatever happens and affects your digital twin, whether it is originated in the physical world or from the digital stuff, from digital twin from the other entity. Okay? So, all of that is allowing us to slowly build taxonomies for digital harms, digital rights, and use cases, which is the most ridiculous, strange situation that I can think of in standards worldwide. This, I'm dying for someone to tell me that we are wrong. I've been asking all over the place. When I mean all over the place, I mean really in technical forums and so forth. No one can point to me an international standard on use cases of data operation. Nobody. It's quite impressive if you think about it. If you prototype the type of operations that you would do over data in any application, I don't care if it's 3,000 types of operations, it's still a limited amount of them. It's still finite. It's not infinite. And if I'm expected to have data moving from one system in China to the US to India to Malaysia, and I'm expecting protections to be standardized, I need to be able to define what they're doing with the data. What kind of transformations they're doing. Well, there's no standard. So we are trying to put out so that when Malaysia, for instance, exports some data to another place, they would come with restrictions like, we will not allow you to do this and this and this and this. And we all agree what this means. But at the moment, not possible. It's ridiculous. So we try to structure as well the DCDR framework in ways that are intelligible. I'm not going to get into details for this. We already have some drafts on how this is going to look like, but basically I can tell you that layer 3 is how a software architect would look at the framework. Layer 2 is how someone who works in information theory would look at the framework. And layer 1 is more on physics. Because basically what we're trying to do is to justify why this is possible thanks to definitions layer 2 and why layer 2 exists because of actual physical definitions. We are not taking it lightly. We are making a lot of very important work on and serious work on being able to make a framework that it is properly defined and properly justified. So, summarizing, you have people who can be exposed to personal harms and you would like to protect them through human rights. Those human rights are defined by organizations and by treaties, UDHR, Business and Human Rights, which by the way is going to be affecting you in a few months. The government is issuing, we hope sometime next year, a national action plan on business and human rights. I'll say a bit more about it later. And that's going to be affecting all businesses in Malaysia, specifically as well tech. You have normally nationality constitution, etc., etc. And at the international level, you have international organizations, the governments who enact them, and they're also supported by other stakeholders, typically civil society, and so on and so on and so on. And just in parallel, for the digital twins created through data of those people, you have exactly the same pipeline. What we've been trying is to set up something that can be understood not only by technologists, but also by human rights defenders. Because I can tell you right now, most of these things, they don't get it. The traditional digital rights defender still looks at digital rights as human rights applied to technology as a medium. But they're not trying to understand how that medium is built. That's not a typical conversation they're having. And they are failing in what's going to be the outcome that they desire, specifically because they're not engaging the people that matters, you. So, like I was saying, the ideal would be that an SDK is provided for you, open source, community-driven, yada yada, I don't need to give you all the details, whereby you should not have to worry about how to be compliant and how to protect people's data. That's already given to you. And all that you need to do is concentrate on your value proposition, on your business logic. What do you want to do with it? What are the service that you want to provide, etc., etc., knowing that you are not harming people. How would that look like? Well, you would want it to be able to go into your stack, into your code base. And once you launch your pipeline, when you reach the test point, you should be able to run your own test unit to verify compliance, then signal an agency, Data Protection Commissioner here in Malaysia, for instance, that would know that, hey, I'm requesting for your verification of compliance. They would in turn check your package remotely through a number of APIs. And once you're cleared, off you go and you deliver. Okay? This is not something that should be done manually. It should be incorporated in your pipelines. Transparently for you. So, what is it that we've been doing about this? So, this I'm not joking. The main objective for our organization is basically serve you. So what we've been doing until now have been providing training for you guys to understand your role in technology and how you can make technology better, but also to represent you in front of the government, because most of the time the government is not asking your opinion. Okay? I don't recall last time they sent you an email asking you, hey, PDPA is coming about. What do you have to say about it? They open public consultation, fair point. Okay? But it doesn't necessarily get to your ears that that's happening. And it should. There should be a mechanism so that every time a policy that is going to affect you should at least send to you an email, an SMS, whatever it is, so that you can get involved. And if it's not going to be directly you, you can maybe talk to your boss, who may be part of an organization who's part of PICOM, and PICOM goes and represents you and passes whatever you want to say. So it doesn't have to be specifically you, but at least you should be aware so that you can try to find your way around and have whatever opinion you have or whatever ideas passed to the government. Because they will be passing laws that are going to affect you. You might as well know in advance. So, we normally do, so we keep an eye on whichever policies are being passed in technology in the different jurisdictions where we are. We are able to notify you when that happens. And normally what we do is we generate our own recommendations. And then we like to typically organize a workshop, invite people to come over. We present the recommendations we're going to pass. And then we discuss what you want to add, what you want to remove, what you think can be updated, etc., etc. And then we pass the recommendation to the government. Okay? So we work on DCDR, Data-Centric Digital Rights. We are currently working on that framework that I was mentioning. So we already have a draft of how the life cycle looks like, each of one of the layers. We have a version 0.3, if you will, about the taxonomies. So we are slowly working on it. We expect that it's going to take us about 1 year, more or less, because we are going to be passing it to a number of experts who are information theories experts, etc., so that they can basically punch holes and figure out where we can be wrong and have something that is as much solid as possible. By the way, if any one of you is interested in participating, come to see us. I just said it. We are hoping to also, once we get the framework, to be able to translate that into documents that can be passed to academia, because you would like to be passed that in the educational pipeline of all technologies as much as possible. This is what I was mentioning before. So the short story is that when the UDHR was passed in 48, it was only concentrated on governments. Because back in the days, corporations were not a big thing. And so they were just basically trying to ask governments, please be nice to your people, give them rights, etc., respect rights. Okay? As time passes, corporations grow. The UN realizes, oh, we missed the mark here. And so they decided to have a parallel document that focuses much more to corporations. That's what's called business and human rights. It's essentially human rights applied to businesses. Malaysia is a signatory of that commitment, and they are doing what's called now, they're preparing what's called a national action plan, which is a fancy word for a policy, for a law. Okay? That's going to be affecting all businesses, and we've been in conversations with the government trying to suggest that, well, government, with the agencies related to the building of the National Action Plan, in order to suggest that they consider technology as an important part of it. We are going to be submitting them our recommendations. We actually had a workshop on that document about a month ago. And the cool thing for us is that business of human rights unites the two things that I was mentioning before. Both the human rights component and the digital rights component. So by being able to apply business human rights in a tech company, you can now ask them to be human rights compliant and digital rights compliant. So for us, the way to move this to corporates is through BHR. That's the strategy that we have observed. Because they're going to have to be following whatever the law says. So if we can influence the law to request some protection level in how the software is implemented, maybe we have a little bit of the problem solved. We also run an initiative called TechUp. In here, we try to do a couple of things. First thing is we try to provide you with the necessary for you to become the next generation of rights defenders. And what does that entail? First one, of course, you need to know more about technology. You might be junior, you may have a lot to learn ahead of you. That's totally fine. But can someone tell me when was last time that any computer science faculty gave you training on public speaking abilities? I'm still to meet any. I've heard about some having elective choices, like the optional ones, but not in the main curriculum. If you want to change technology, you're going to have to be speaking up. You're going to have to be at some point a project manager. You have to be the one who calls the shots so that you can tell your team, hey, we're going to be actually doing things differently, so now we're going to be protecting people's data. All right? You need to go to open standard working groups and ask for those changes to be in the standard, not in the law of the country, in the standard, because the standard is going to be adopted by many countries. Fix the problem in the standard, 35 countries are going to have the problem solved. Because they don't create their own standards. They take whatever is in the market. Make sure that certain things cannot be done by design. When that's incorporated, most of the problem is solved. Not all of it, but a big chunk of it. So that's the second part we do. The third part is that we also teach you on ecosystem mapping. Basically, there's plenty of big organizations out there that are authoritative in things such as domain names, TCP/IP, internet governance, and so forth. There's plenty of them. There's barely any Malaysians there. They are making a lot of decisions that affect you. You guys are not there. So if you want to be able to do the change that you want, you need to know the technical part, how to express it, and how to move into the system. How they function, how to participate in working groups. I want to change this particular standard here. Okay, who's taking care of this? ITF, all right. What's the working group that is doing? Okay, this one. Here's the list server. Okay, I have to get registered. Okay, here it is. Oh, there's a fellowship, nice. All of those things are mostly they're not being disseminated in Malaysia. So our intention is that you train yourself to be that change maker that we hope that you will be, and at the same time provide yourself into an international exposure. Okay? Yeah. You want to change tech? You got to get international. It's not going to happen if you stay in Malaysia. Never. I still don't recall any standard that was developed in Malaysia or in Thailand or in France. They are never developed at the local level. They are always developed at an international level. Big players are always in between. Get there. Find your way. There are ways. It's very simple. You just need to know that it's possible. It's not that complicated. It requires effort. I'm not going to lie to you, okay? It doesn't happen overnight. But it can be done. I don't think I really need to even read this. If you don't like certain things in your life, it doesn't apply only to technology. You have to be the one changing it. I used to be a programmer in a much more sad part of my life. I then moved into sysadmin. And it's been 20 plus years that how data is manipulated that has been bothering me. And when I was a very simple programmer, I thought, someone is going to be doing it with more money, with more knowledge, with more connections. I'm nobody. 20 years later, nothing. If something bothers you, go for it. Try. You'll sleep better. Okay, so if you want to reach out to us, we are in booth 45, and unfortunately my team has totally failed me because I asked them to bring the t-shirts, but they haven't. So, well, whatever. If you want to support the organization, we sell those t-shirts. We don't sell products in general. We always rely on donations and support from people or other foundations. So, as always, welcome, but not mandatory. And the reason why I say all of this, I always finish my presentation with these slides. We are not the people anymore. We are the cyborgs. And if you think that this is an overreach, if you think I'm exaggerating, I invite you to give me your cell phones and we have this conversation again in 1 week time. You cannot live without your devices anymore. They have become a totally part of you. It's not because they are not fused in you like in the movies, like, oh, I'm a cyborg and I have a robotic arm. No. But you still interact with them through an interface, your eyes and your thumb. A very slow interface, a very ineffective interface, an interface nonetheless. And here comes the twist. Right now, you own your devices, so you can still make the case that because I own it, all the data that I generate in my device is mine. Companies are slowly moving into being service providers. That's a game changer. Because they will not sell you the phone anymore. They will lease it to you. Apple is not going to be selling their cars. For a while, they may, to get into the market. But eventually, they're going to be leasing them. Because it's much more profitable. And because you don't own it, whatever is generated from it doesn't belong to you. That's going to be the legal argument. Careful with that. Careful with bringing personal assistance from other companies. Alexa. Any questions? I like to say that the most useless question is the one that you never ask. Microphone.
Hello.
Hi.
So you did mention about having this framework or like inside of as part of the application development workflow.
Correct.
Do you see that as another gatekeeper that will actually slow down innovation? Like you cannot deploy because it doesn't pass this government or someone, but it might be slow also. So I mean, yeah, because from my perspective that as a tech company, that's what our main advantage compared to like a car industry where the innovation is much slower because they have all this regulation. So yeah.
Yeah. So my answer has two parts. The first one, do you don't want cars to be safe? The only reason why you care about that is because you can have a specific emotional connection between a car being unsafe and the possible consequences. People can die, no good. Car has to be safe. So before the car gets into the market, you pass all the crash test dummies, etc., etc. Your phone actually goes through a very strict control test. And we can do that because from a technical perspective, we do have the checklist on how to do that. Essentially, you don't want the phone to explode on your face because the battery is not properly implemented. Okay? The issue that we have is that our relation with data is way more detached emotionally. So it doesn't feel that it has any particular side effect. And that's part of the things that we want to solve with the framework. We want to be able to say, if this happens, that's the chain of consequences, that's the end result, that's the hurt, that's the harm. Okay? And now, when it comes to the actual slowing down, it is true that you could be there at that point if it was manual. But if you are able to implement it in your pipeline, how long does it take to run a test unit? 5 minutes? Because it's, 500,000 million lines. Properly done, it shouldn't have to be a problem.
So okay. So in that case, who do you see that like the data? Who will be the owner inside of the company? Like,
so the data should always belong to you. Period.
No, sorry, I meant not the data itself, but the testing or everything of the that you need to pass for the data framework.
Yep.
Because in parallel, for example, you have this unit test, right? There will always be a unit test owner who will maintain the unit test. If nobody's maintaining it, then probably like it always break and nobody's want to look at it anymore.
Who maintains the equivalent of the unit test for Bomba to check that the fire system here works? The government. Because the government has a duty of care towards the citizens because of the Constitution. Your right to life imposes the government to have safeties for that. And so there's the typical situation that you have with any properly regulated product is you have a very clear standard on what the compliance is about. F&B, cars, buildings, you name it, doesn't matter, okay? All the manufacturers know the rules of that compliance. And they do their prototypes according to that compliance. Then they send it to an agency that knows how to verify compliance. In the case of cars, Asia NCAP. In the case of buildings, I don't know what's the department, but there's a department that knows how to test all of this. Okay? In the case of fire, Bomba. And before they come to inspect, you have been running your own test units, checking everything. Because you don't want them to come and say, that fail. Then it takes 6 months more for them to come. You want to do it at once. Okay? So what you need is an agency that is implementing whatever the regulation is saying. And of course, if you're looking at it from an international perspective, you require some kind of hierarchy that functions, such as ICANN, for instance, that has the management for domain name systems, where there is a central policy that trickles down into agencies that takes care at the local level. So MyNIC implements the policies that ICANN says here locally. So you would want to have that common standard of protection anywhere in the world in terms of programmatic implementation that then gets observed and monitored locally through a specific agency that will have the tools to do so. And the maintenance, ideally for me, is that should be done by the community. It cannot fall in the hands of a specific small amount of people because then you don't know what kind of backdoors they're going to have, and the code has to be open. Because if it's going to be in pretty much any single piece of software that you can think of, it has to be observable and monitored. All right? Any other question? No? All right. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening. If you have any other question, we'll be in booth 45 over there. All right?
Okay, that's about it. Thank you so much for round of applause to Mr. John. From what you have shared just now, Mr. John, can you stay with me in our wonderful imaginary stage here?
Ken. 1, 2, still here? Yes.
So, from what you have shared just now, I think I see you more of an activist. Do you agree?
I don't know about that, but yes.
Because you're fighting, like you're voicing out about the bigger purpose of that. So everyone, single one of us here today, have their own part to play, the role to play in this, the whole, right? Well,
like I said, they are the ones who are architecting and building technology.
Yeah.
If technology is the new horizon and the new land that is going to be populated by us, they are the ones who have the ability to decide how that land is going to behave.
Yeah.
The earth was given to us with a number of rules. We just have to accept them. But they can change the rules.
Yeah. Because I can totally relate when you mention about Bomba and building approval by the authorities, local council. Normally in that process we have this pre-consultation stage where they consult and whether you get that pre-approval before you can actually build the building.
Correct.
So in this case there's maybe many fine lines in between to determine which one is right or wrong.
Yep.
So it's very tricky. So
But
that's
the
where
thing
you come into
so
picture.
we got used to those processes.
Right.
In every I wouldn't want a car that hasn't gone through proper checkups before being in the market.
I see.
I think nobody would buy it. But we got used to use any piece of software. That goes all the way back to when Microsoft was selling Windows for the first time, and their end user license agreement said, look it up, there's a piece that says, we do not assure that Windows does what we promise you it does. Hello?
Yeah.
And you say, click yes, go, install.
Sure.
We just got used to it.
I see. Okay, another round of applause to Mr. John. Thank you so much for your time, for
Thank
your
you, guys.
sharing. and for your attention. Okay, now kita ada